Let's move on to fire alarm systems. Fire alarm systems are required per the Building and Fire Code and are to be designed and installed in accordance with NFPA 72 as amended in Chapter 35 of the Building Code. The present Model Code edition of 72 is the 2016 edition. The PI should have access to all applicable reference materials. NFPA 72, the National Fire Alarm Signaling Code 2016 edition, and Title 24, Parts 2, 3, and 9, which would contain information and requirements associated with fire alarm systems. You can also review the DSA website, which has a link to the NFPA. Changes to materials on fire alarm component submittal packages requires a CCD to be submitted. Any of these changes, such as change in model, change in manufacturer, change in components, state fire marshal listings, those would need to be submitted for review prior to installation or initiation of the change. For emergency voice alarm communication systems, which are now required, need to review NFPA 72 and associated DSA-IR F1. Review and inspect for compliance with DSA-approved fire alarm documents. Deviations from the approved plans does require an approval through the CCD process. The PI is responsible for being familiar with the approved fire alarm documents. They should possess a library of code reference materials, especially the 2016 edition of NFPA 72, as a reference in following along for inspections and installation. Fire alarm installations are typically included in the electrical drawings. The component materials booklet with CSFN listing sheets and correct listing numbers and current date should also be provided in the package. NFPA 72, Section 14.4.1.1 directs that all new systems shall be inspected and tested in accordance with the requirements of Chapter 14. That the AHJ, which is DSA, needs to be notified prior to the initial acceptance test. When initiating devices, notification appliances, or control relays are added, these shall also be functionally tested. When an initiating device, notification appliance, or control relay is deleted, another device, appliance, or control relay on the circuit shall be operated. Hardware modifications or repairs to control equipment must also be tested. Additionally, any modifications to site-specific software must be identified and tested. Copies of site-specific software need to be included in the fire alarm documents cabinet. Fire alarm systems, NFPA 72. Control panels and devices. Project inspectors should ensure that the circuit breaker feeding the fire alarm control unit is protected by a listed lock-on type and is clearly identified. Ensure that all fire alarm terminal and junction boxes are clearly identified as being an element of the fire alarm system, and ensure that the identification and accessibility for the permanent circuits. The lock-on devices used for the panel must be listed and breakable. California Electrical Code Section 760.30, Fire Alarm Circuit Identification. A common misconception is that conduit boxes must be read in color. The code, however, states that whenever there is a fire alarm junction box, it shall be identified as fire alarm. There is no specific direction for fire alarm junction boxes to be read in color. NFPA 72, section 10.6.5.2.3 notes that for fire alarm and or signaling systems, it is the circuit disconnecting means that shall have a red marking. The branch circuits and associated connections shall be protected against physical damage. Where the circuit breaker is the disconnecting means, an approved breaker locking device shall be installed. Project inspector needs to ensure that the fire alarm notification system has been tested in accordance with the manufacturer's published instructions and the current 2016 NFPA 72 inspection and testing requirements as outlined in Chapter 14. NFPA 72, Figure 7.8.2, contains a copy of the system record of completion documentation that must be provided to the PI by the contractor.
We need to verify the candela rating of ceiling-mounted devices, especially when over 10 feet high. Verify that heat detector spacing on high ceilings is compliant with the standard and the manufacturer's documentation. Verify the correct candela setting for the visual portion as shown on the DSA approved documents. Ensure appliances are located according to the DSA approved plans, and ensure appliances have proper application. No wall strobes installed in ceiling locations. The increased candela rating is required for notification appliances installed on ceilings over 10 feet high, as the increased height affects the visual acuity of the device to the occupant. Device application is very important. Strobes installed on ceilings must be listed for such. Additional speakers may be required. Ensure a CCD is generated. Intelligibility of speakers for emergency voice alarm systems can be tested with special equipment. Ensure the installer and tests that you are witnessing utilize the proper equipment to achieve the proper pressure requirements. Where heat detectors are used on high ceilings, spacing has to be reduced. Refer to NFPA 72, Table 17.6.3.5.1. Ceiling visible device spacing is regulated in NFPA 72 by Table 18.5.5.4.1b.
Ensure that the mounting location of all devices matches the plans. Note that detectors and sloped ceilings are within 3 feet of the peak of the slope. Verify that wall-mounted detectors are located within the required height in relation to the ceiling. Smoke detectors are required to be located on the ceiling, or if located on a sidewall, they must be between the ceiling and 12 inches down from the ceiling as measured to the top of the detector. Where beam pockets occur in construction, ensure that the beam pockets have detectors installed in each pocket, if required by NFPA 72. Where beam detectors are utilized, ensure that the beam detectors are located in areas that will not be activated by such ancillary things as basketball backstop lifts, or movable curtains, or other types of suspended pieces of equipment. Beam pockets often get missed due to a lack of design team coordination. The plan should show the locations of all detectors, and detection devices. Some ceilings are not depicted correctly on the plans or may have unique configurations. Where there are beams or pockets that are not shown on the plans, ensure that a CCD is generated to correct the plans and provide the proper spacing of detectors. Ensure that bays with beam projection below the ceiling more than 18 inches and more than 8 feet on center are treated as separate areas for detection coverage. Bays not meeting these dimensions may often be considered as one bay by the designer, which is incorrect. NFPA 72, Section 17.6.3.3.1.3 states that where the beams project greater than 18 inches below the ceiling and are greater than 8 feet on center, each bay formed by the beams shall be treated as a separate area. Verify attic access location for detectors installed in the concealed spaces. Ensure that all the backflow, PIV, flow, and tamper switches are supervised by the fire alarm control unit. During testing, the panel should record and reflect each one of these devices as a supervisory alarm. HVAC systems can interfere with initiation devices such as smoke and or heat detectors, in that the air velocity from the diffuser will keep heat or smoke from reaching the detector and facilitate activation. Smoke detectors must be located a minimum of 36 inches from HVAC supply or return registers. Conditions as shown here may not be obvious in plan views, but installation and placement will certainly be obvious. NFPA 72 in the Annex, Section A 17.7.1.9, notes that smoke detectors can be affected by electrical and mechanical influences and by aerosols and particulate matter found in protected spaces. In plan view, placement may not have been obvious. This is the reason for this picture. Spacing should comply with the manufacturer's installation instructions and listings and the DSA-approved plans. Headers or other obstructions, such as automatic door closers and mechanical registers, affect placement. Remember that smoke detectors are required to be located 36 inches minimum away from any air supply or return registers. Each initiation device or notification appliance in suspended ceilings is required to be mounted to an appropriate J-box. Ensure that detector dust covers are provided during construction, and most importantly, that they are removed upon completion of construction. California Electrical Code Section 760.30 for fire alarm circuit identification notes that fire alarm circuits shall be identified at terminal and junction boxes in a manner that helps to prevent unintentional signals on the fire alarm system circuits during testing and servicing of other systems. CEC Article 800.25 for abandoned cables notes that the accessible portion of abandoned communications cables shall be removed. Where cables are identified for future use with a tag, that tag shall be of sufficient durability to withstand the environment involved. All dust covers, remember, must be removed prior to final testing of the fire alarm system and prior to building occupancy. The voltage drop test is critical in ensuring that each device receives that proper voltage necessary to operate. Voltage drop is impacted by the length of the wire run and the size of the conductor. For this reason, the PI must witness the voltage drop test generally used by the contractor for the worst case scenario, which would be the most demanding or most remote from the panel. However, note that changes during installation may alter that which is designed so that those that are furthest from the panel may no longer be the most demanding circuit. The devices must be within manufacturer's operating voltage range as indicated on the cut sheets. By UL's listing standards, all devices are listed at 16 to 33 volts. Anything outside of this range would not be acceptable. Please refer to Inspection Manual subsections 2D and 2E. And it is important when doing this in test, refer to the manufacturer's product data sheet and the voltage drop calculations provided on the fire alarm drawings. Here's a copy of a notification appliance cut sheet. As you'll see on the right-hand side, this speaker strobe has an operating voltage range of 16 to 33 volts. The operational testing is performed at the end of the 24-hour period to simulate a worst-case condition on the battery.